to write. We are reaching the final days now. As a reminder, we've been doing this season 6 of the podcast, where we've been exploring some of the mind gymnastics to help you get ready to write, tying in with NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month. Today's episode is called How to Click Whirr Your Way to a Delightful Day. And it's very much a case of life imitating art, because I started the live video at 8:30, which is when it was due to be published. And then there was an interruption and I had to stop. And so here I am half an hour later. What does this have to do with click whirring your way to a delightful day? This is all about routines and how you can set yourself up for success by establishing routines. This works for writing, but it also works for anything in life, really. And the beautiful thing about it is that when things don't go quite to plan, when there are interruptions, or when your day feels like it's been derailed somewhat, you can, thanks to the power of habits, you can click whirr your way back into a space where you are then ready to write. So it really is quite appropriate that we're needing to restart this one today, because it does play into this. Now, I cannot take any credit for this invention is the wrong word, but whatever the correct word is. I actually came across this in a blog post probably about 10 years ago, maybe 9 years ago. There's a blogger, James, I forget her last name. She's in Canada. She has a blog called Men with Pens. And I haven't been in contact with the author of that website for a long time. But back in the day, when Give a Brick, which is a charity that we set up with my local church, back in 2010, I fell into this world of people working from home and blogging and all of this good stuff, and made loads of new friends. And James was one of those people who I met, and I actually had the opportunity to write a guest post for her site, which was lovely. But I mention that because right back then, like I say, about 9 or 10 years ago, she wrote this article essentially about writing routines, and it stuck with me. And so one day I took it for a trial run back when I was writing fiction. So this would have been 2015, 2016, around that sort of time. I used to have certain routines that would be in place before doing writing. So there would be coffee, there would be music, there would be a certain place in the house, and there would be peace and quiet. And on this particular day, it was one of those days where everything had gone a little bit to pot. It was probably the school holidays, because I usually find that my routines go a bit to pot in the school holidays. Bearing in mind that, 2015, 2016, my children were that much younger and so less independent. And so school holidays were slightly more chaotic than they are now. Now the biggest level of chaos is working out who wants the car and when. But it was different then. And so I remember on this particular day testing out actually how powerful these habits could be. And so that the rationale behind it, the idea is that if you, prior to writing, but prior to settling down to write, whether you write by hand or whether you write into your computer, you want to set for yourself some routines or some patterns. Now, if you don't, you might already have patterns there, and it's just simply a case of exploring what those patterns are. However, if you don't have patterns or habits in place, you can choose what they're going to be. You might like to, like I say, light a nice candle. You might want to put some music on. You might have a cup of tea. Whatever that would look like, you can by setting the same established pattern every time, you are signaling to your mind that it's time to write. And then you follow that routine, you sit down and you write, and as if by magic, and of course it's not magic, it's thanks to the power of your amazing mind, you get into it straight away, particularly if you've used some of the other tools that we've explored over the last few days. For example, the open loops piece comes to mind. But on this particular day, it was something like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was definitely not the time when I was usually liking to write at the time. And so I tested it. And so I did follow all of the same patterns that I would normally do on a regular, going steady kind of day. You know those days when everything goes to plan? One of those days. This was definitely not one of those days. But I followed those routines, and as if by magic, I sat down and the words flowed, and it happened. And so the opportunity for you with this is to establish, okay, what are your patterns or your routines or your habits? And like I say, if you don't already have them, you can create them. And most importantly, establish them before you need them. So I am somebody who kind of goes I don't resist routine, but I have a little bit of a a love-hate relationship with it, in as much that I know that I do better with a bit of routine and a bit of structure, but I also don't want it to be so constrained that it leaves me feeling like I can't. Or I also don't want it to be so rigid that when things don't go according to a plan, in inverted commas, that it derails the whole day. There's nothing wonderful about that. So if you have a structure that's too rigid and doesn't allow for flexibility, then you run the risk of, because how many days actually do go according to plan? How often, maybe it's just me, but I find quite often we might have this idea and that idea, but sometimes it's a little bit of a sidestep, shall we say. In fact, one of the pieces which Holy Spirit was nudging me about yesterday even was that reminder to underschedule. Stop trying to cram so much stuff into the day and go with the flow with me instead, which is beautiful, and I love doing that. And at the same time, some kind of structure. So what I actually have right now on a little note card, I have a list, and there's no times on this list. It's simply we're gonna journal with Holy Spirit, then we're gonna walk the dog, then we're gonna do the love notes. But as to the when that happens, it's much more fluid. And so your plaything as a result of this is to explore your routines, your habits, those pieces that you have in place. Maybe you have them in place already and you just didn't really think of them as habits and patterns. Or maybe you actually need some new ones. Remember, these need to be ones that empower you and leave you feeling, yes, excited and ready to write. So if there are habits that have crept in there, so immediately the one that comes to mind for myself is checking the news. So I have put myself on a fairly permanent ban from checking the news first thing in the morning, because there's nothing terribly good in that news. The good news is Jesus. The news on the BBC is not usually full of anything. And the way I look at it is actually, if there's something big happening I need to know about, my husband will probably tell me anyway. And because that habit, I had got into a habit of checking the news while I was having a cup of tea. And it was not empowering me. So remember, these routines, these patterns, these habits, you want them to be things that leave you feeling excited or empowered, or insert your own word there for how you'd like to feel as you get ready to write. And like I say, this can be used to help you prepare to write, but it can be used for other things as well. So one of the pieces, I know I use the treadmill as an example a lot over the last few episodes, but I always, before I go to bed every night, I make sure I know where I have a pair of clean socks. Because this might be too much information, but I go on the treadmill in my pajamas, but I obviously want to wear trainers, which requires socks. And so part of my click whirr, in order to be able to go on the treadmill first thing in the morning and to make it easy for myself, is to know where my trainers are and to know where my socks are, and to be able to get both of those things in a way that's not difficult. I also have another little habit that I've got into. So I'll get myself a big glass of water and drink half of it. I don't ask me why, I just do. When I come back in from the treadmill, I drink the other half of it. These are silly little habits which you think, well, they don't really make a difference. But actually, from your mind's perspective, they do make a difference, because they signal to your mind that this thing is going to happen. So like I say, you can use this for writing, and I would encourage you to do that, because that's the premise of all of this. But you can also use this for other things as well, particularly if there are things that you might sometimes, some mornings, be tempted to put off. I mean, I don't need any click whirr reminders to clean my teeth every day. I simply just clean my teeth every day. I don't need any reminders to have a shower. There are some things you simply just do because you do. So this is not about, minuscule detail for every single part of life, because that would really be tedious. This is simply about creating patterns, habits, routines around those areas of life where it might sometimes otherwise be easy to be derailed. And like I say, the real power in this is for those times when the day goes a little bit upside down, because it would have been too easy. Take today as an example with the interruption as we started this live video. It would have been too easy to go, oh well, that's it, we're not doing the live video today because 8:30 is gone, and forget about it. But no, that's just nonsense. Why does the whole day have to be ruined or gone off the rails because of one incident? It doesn't have to. That's simply a choice. You get to choose. You have power. You have authority over your mind. You can choose. And that's the real power of the habits, the patterns, the routines, is it does help establish those pieces and make it easier for you to pick up the bits and keep moving on those days when things go upside down. And remember, you're not the only one who has days that go upside down. We often, we don't always tell everybody that the day has gone upside down. We usually just pick ourselves up and sort of hope to get on with it with nobody noticing. But I like to give voice to those things and those days when things go upside down, to recognize that it happens to the best of us. So know that you're not alone. So your plaything as a reminder, look at your patterns, your habits, your routines. If you already have them, brilliant. If you don't already have them, or they're ones that maybe need a bit of tweaking, go tweak them. Choose habits that are going to empower you. And don't forget, you get to do this with God. If you're not sure, ask Holy Spirit to help you. Jesus called him your guide, your counselor, your teacher, your friend. You don't need to do this on your own. And equally, doing it on your own, you get to do it in community if you'd like to. That's my reminder for this week about the Rainbow Room inside the Blue House. Youier.com/Rainbow Room is where you can find out more about that. In the meantime, thank you for joining me for this episode. Have fun with this one. This is one of my favourites. We'll be back tomorrow at 8:30 UK time is the plan. Unless, of course, we get derailed again, but I'm not anticipating that. But nobody ever anticipates that. Anyway, have a lovely day. I shall catch up with you tomorrow.